Hello, my name is Frank Schorsch, and for this section of the video tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to set up a FK arm. To begin with, I'm going to build the controllers that we'll be using. Start with a circle. I'm going to convert this into an editable spline. Select the spline segment, duplicate it to create a rotation gizmo. Got this done, I'm going to go ahead and align it in both position and orientation to the upper arm. Duplicate this, align it to position and rotation to the wrist, and then create one final controller for the elbow. So this wrist controller is a little bit big, so I'm going to go ahead and scale this down. Now that we've done that, I'm going to link in the bones to the controllers. You'll take your wrist bone, link it into the wrist controller. Take the wrist, link it into the forearm. Forearm, link it into the elbow. Elbow, link it into the upper arm. Upper arm into the shoulder, and the shoulder into the clavicle. Once you've done that, you're ready to mirror. Go ahead and make sure that your clavicle is delinked from your chest. Go ahead and select the entire arm chain. Group it. Use your mirror function to copy it across the X. Make sure it's a copy and the mirrored limits have been copied over. Change this value to a positive. Looks like it shifted over a little too far, so I'm just going to copy the X value here and paste it onto that. Ungroup these. Select your two clavicle controllers. Link them into the chest. I'm going to go ahead and select the controllers on both sides of the body now. I'm going to hold down Alt, right-click, freeze the transform. Freezing controllers allows you to animate. Select the controllers, hold down Alt, right-click, and return the transforms to 0, snapping back to their original positions. Hello, my name is Frank Schorsch, and for this section of the video tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to set up a IK arm system. To begin with, I'm going to import the controllers that I'm going to be using for the IK arm. So we'll be using this one for the wrist, so I'm going to align it to the wrist position and not the orientation. So it's a little bit big, so I'm going to go ahead and scale this down. So when you scale an object on the top level, it creates scaling values. To bake these out, go to your Utilities panel, Reset Xform, Reset Selected, and then convert this back into whatever it originally was, in this case an editable spline. Once you've done that, go ahead and orient it to the rotation of the wrist. Go to your Hierarchy tab, Effect Object Only, go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees into a vertical position. Once you've done that, turn Effect Object off. Go ahead and align your elbow controller to the forearm in position. We're going to scale this down as well. Reset the X-form. Align it to the position and orientation. Go to your Translate, make sure it's in local, and pull this back a little ways. After that, I'm going to remove the rotation information. Go to Effect Object Only, and rotate it 90 degrees into a vertical position as well. So now that we have our controllers in the scene, I'm going to go ahead and build the IK solver. So under Animation, IK Solvers, High Solver, I'm going to go from your upper arm to your wrist bone. Once you've done that, go ahead and link the IK solver into the wrist controller. Then select the wrist bone, go to Animation, Constrain, Orientation Constraint to the wrist controller. Select your IK solver. Under your Motions tab, the IK solver properties, we're going to pick a target for the swivel angle. We're going to be using the pole vector controller that we imported. Once you've done this, your arm is ready to be mirrored, so go ahead and make sure that your clavicle controller is broken off from your chest. Select your entire arm, make sure you're getting both the elbow controller, the IK solver, and the wrist controller. Group these together. Use your mirror function to copy it across the X. Let's copy, and that the IK limits have been mirrored. Press OK. So now we're going to shift this arm into its position on the opposite side. So you want to change your Translate into View. Make this a positive number. Go ahead and ungroup these. Select both your clavicles, link these into your chest. Now you're going to select all of the controllers on both sides of the body, hold down Alt, right-click, and you're going to freeze the transforms. This will allow you to animate the positions of IK. Then select your controllers, hold down Alt, right-click, and transform to 0 to snap them back into their original position. So this has been the tutorial on how to build a IK arm chain. Hello, my name is Frank Schorsch, and for this section of the video tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to set up a IK-FK blending system for your arms. To begin with, I'm going to select the 3 bones that make up our arm chain. I'm going to duplicate them twice. To make these a little bit more visually distinct, I'm going to select the FK chain, change the color to white. I'm also going to add fins on the backside and remove the side fins. For the IK chain, I'm going to change it to black, add front fins, and remove the side fins. Now that we have our 2 bone chains, I'm going to go ahead and start by creating the controllers we'll be using for the 2 different chains. For the FK, I'm going to start with a circle, convert it to an editable spline. I'm going to go ahead and change this color. Select the spline, rotate it, and duplicate it until we create a rotation gizmo. Then I'm going to align the controller to both the position and orientation of the upper arm for the FK. Duplicate this, do the same for the wrist, then create one final controller for the elbow. Once I've done this, I'm going to import the controllers we'll be using for the IK system. I'm going to take the controller we'll be using for the wrist. I'm going to align it to the position of the wrist controller on the IK chain, but I'm not going to align it to the orientation. I'm going to go ahead and scale this down. Then to remove the scaling information, go to my utilities, reset X-form, reset selected, convert this into a editable spline. Realign it to the wrist for orientation. Go into our hierarchy tab, affect object only, and rotate this 90 degrees. Now I'm going to select our elbow controller, align it to the forearm, only in position. I'm going to go ahead and scale this down. Reset the X-form, convert back into an editable spline. Realign it to both position and orientation of the forearm. Change this to local. Translate it back a little ways. Go to my rotate and remove the rotation information on it. Go to our hierarchy tab, affect object only, rotate this 90 degrees into a vertical position as well. I'm going to go ahead and link everything into the bone systems now. For the IK chain, the controllers are just going to temporarily be linked into the forearm. Also go ahead and change their color so you can see them. For the FK system, I'm going to link them into the bones. So the wrist will go into the wrist controller. The wrist controller will go into the forearm will go into the elbow will go into the upper arm will go into the shoulder, and the shoulder will go into the clavicle. Once you've done this, go ahead and select the shoulder controller and align it to the upper arm bone of our original chain. Press OK, and do the same thing for the upper arm bone of the IK chain. Great, now that you have the bones and controllers for your IK and FK systems, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to set up the IK solver and adding the sliders to your controllers for the blending system. So to begin, I'm going to make sure that the wrist and elbow controllers are not parented to the IK chain. I'm going to link the IK chain into the clavicle. Next, if you select the upper arm bone of the IK chain, animation IK solver's high solver to the end bone of the IK chain. Then, under your motions tab, IK solver properties, IK solver plane. Pick target for the swivel angle, choose the elbow controller that we have set up. Go ahead and link the IK solver into your wrist controller, then select the wrist itself. Animation constraints, orientation constraint to the wrist controller. Alright, now that you have all of your controllers set up for your IK and FK systems, go ahead and select them, hold down Alt, right click, add the slider to the controller. So to do that, go to your modifier tab, modifier list, attribute holder, max script, open script. use the ARM IK/FK switch demo. Go ahead and open up your listener. I'm going to evaluate this, make sure that it's evaluating the definition correctly. Then select just a single line, press enter, and it'll add the slider to our controller. Next thing we're going to do is position the IK and FK chains so that we're able to see them easier. So I'm going to rotate my FK chain up, select the controllers for my IK chain, shift these guys down. And we're going to go ahead and add the orientation constraint that's driven by the slider for the IK/FK systems. Select your first primary bone, animation constraint, orientation constraint, first your FK, and then under your motions tab, rotation to your IK. Do the same thing for all three bones. If we do the wiring now, when you mirror your bone chain across, it will break the linkings. So I'm going to go ahead and just select the controllers on this side of the body. Hold down Alt, set the transforms to 0. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this over. So to begin with, I'm going to make sure that the clavicle is not linked to the body. Make sure that I've got all for my selection type. Select everything, make sure that you're getting the elbow controller, the wrist, and the IK solver. Next, to group these together, go ahead and mirror them across the X, make sure it's a copy and that you're mirroring the IK limits. Change this to a positive number. Go ahead and select both of these, ungroup them. Begin by selecting both your clavicles, linking these into your chest. Now select the elbow controller and the wrist controller on both sides. Link these into the master controller. This will allow us to move the arms around whenever we position the rig in our scene. Then change it to shapes. Select the controllers on both sides of your arms. Go ahead, don't hold down Alt, right click, freeze the transforms. I'm going to go ahead and put some rotation values on the FK chains so that I can see that the orientation blending is working. And now I'm going to wire in the orientation to the slider. I'm going to start with the left side, wire parameters on the controller, modified object, attribute holder, IK/FK switch, IK/FK switch. Then make sure that you're on all, select the bone, transform, rotation, orientation. We're going to select the first orientation constraint. So we want the controller to drive the bone. So over here, we're going to do 100 minus the value of the IK switch. So when the IK/FK switch slider is set to 0, the value here will be 100. When it's set to 100, the value here will be 0. We're going to go ahead and link that up. For the second orientation constraint, we're just going to link it straight across. Go ahead and refresh this for the next bone. Set it up the exact same way, 100 minus, and a straight link. Finally select the wrist, and set this up as well. There we are. Should be able to slide the controller, and it will blend back and forth between the two systems. Excellent. So now we're going to copy the attribute holder level with the slider and the linkings into all of the controllers on this side of the arm. This will allow us to edit the blending value anywhere, regardless of what controller we have selected. Alright, so that's how you set up a IK/FK blending system, and you'll just repeat the process on the other arm to finish it off.